Welcome to the second part of the Future of Digital Art Markets, a panel event devoted to the question of how technology changes the way we deal with art. Throughout this weekend, we are going to explore how technology changes the way we create and experience art, but also how technology, like blockchain, is generating new value and creating new markets. My name is Ronja. I work at the House of Bandits as a project manager, and today I will be guiding us through 1.5 hours of exciting keynotes, entertainment, and discussion about valuing art. When asking about the way we value art, we cannot ignore the financial aspects of a billion-dollar industry. But we can also ask how new technologies like blockchain could make way for some positive change. I would like to thank all participants for their time and engagement, and inviting our viewers at home to actively participate by asking questions in the chat, as they will be answered in our panel later. For everyone who got excited yesterday, yes, we will also reveal the sketch that Yasha, Eva, and Sergio drew yesterday in our panel. And I also invite you to stay a little longer today, because DJ Jane is here for an amazing DJ session after the panel. My first guest today is Stefan Yazzie Herbert, CEO and co-founder of House of Bandits, and also the artist we saw making music in a spinning LED cylinder in our basement just before. Stefan will be giving us an insight into how digital artists sold around $8 million worth of art with the help of blockchain. Without further ado, please welcome Stefan.
Thank you. What is art? What is value or ownership? What is real? These are these very somewhat naive questions that we would ask ourselves every single year when the beginning of the year started, when I was studying digital art at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. When you think about art, a lot of times we think about paintings on the sides of museums that are valued at millions of dollars. But the art market itself is so much more. It's vast and it's subtle. And when you start to try and define it and box it into what exactly it is, that's when you start to realize that it's much more difficult to define what art is than you originally realized. And you can very quickly land at these foundational questions about the fabric of reality itself. And that's where I want to go with you today. I want to think a little bit about what value creation even is, what money is, what is even real, and I want to take a look under the hood of a $64 billion industry. Hi, my name is Stefan Yazzie Herbert, and as Ronja has very clearly said, thank you so much for your introduction. I'm the CEO of House of Bandits, and in my past I've worked as an artist, as a designer, as a filmmaker, and as an entrepreneur. But today I want to talk about 3 aspects of the art market. The past, a brief introduction to how art has historically interacted with money. The present, how current technologies and blockchain are being used to actually change how we're interacting with art and how the art industry is being valued. And thirdly, a little bit of a glimpse into the future, into what trends are currently happening and what we can imagine might actually happen out of this. So let's start with the past. How has money historically interacted with art? Well, historically, there's 2 reasons why you have to do with art when we're talking about these huge sums. It's either you're in it for the love or you're in it for the money. Now, I think in reality, it's a little bit of a mix of the 2, but don't get me wrong. There are plenty of people out there who really are invested in the art market because they truly believe in it. They love supporting the art industry. They love owning art. They love being part of the entire process. But there is a lot of money to be made in the art industry as well. And we do live in a capitalist society. So wherever there is money to be generated, there is money to be invested. And that's kind of a question when you're thinking about $64 billion that are being traded a year. Where does that money come from? And where does it go? And what is it being used for? $64 billion is an absurd amount of money. And when you think that only 1% of artists are making up more than half of the sales, the question becomes, how are we valuing these things at all? And there's a couple of different answers to this, and we're not going to get too far into it. Some of them are more sinister, but some of them are very clear. At the end of the day, art is an asset, a legally recognized asset. And I'm going to get a little bit technical here. Bear with me, we're going to talk about taxes. When it comes to owning something, you increase the value of personal wealth, you increase the value of a company if you're able to claim an asset. It's not an expense. It's not something that you buy and it's gone, but you buy and you're able to resell that. You buy and you're able to watch it appreciate in value. And that's ultimately what, for many people, it is, an investment. You buy, and hopefully in the future, your art will be worth more. This is typical economic theory. I don't think that it's sinister to think this about at all. But there's also plenty of more sinister things within the art market, like money laundering, for example. Art is a great way to take dirty money and make it clean. Now, I'm not going to go become an investigative journalist here, but one example is from the Mexican government, when in 2011, they changed the law in order to require a little bit more info upon the buyers that were actually going into the art market. And they saw art sales dropped by 61%. Why? Well, it's unclear exactly why, but a working theory is that the Mexican cartel was the actual main buyer of art because it's a great way to turn money into something more legitimate. Another example that we have from this is market manipulation. It's a great way if you're working together with collectors and galleries in order to up the value of your own art artificially. Now, again, these are more sinister uses of how the art market has existed in the past, and let's just assume the best. Let's just assume that people invest in art because they think it's beautiful and they think that it is something that is worth something and is going to appreciate in value into the future. So that brings us to the present day. What does that mean for us now? Well, you can find that digital artists are kind of left out. Because until now, it's been very clear that you work with a physical representation of something. If you buy a painting, there is only one copy of it. There may be reproductions made, but you can always point to it and say, this is mine, this is what I bought. Things become a little bit unclear in the digital. Now, this is the same thing that all sorts of industries have been having problems with. Gaming has problems with pirating. Same thing goes for movies. And with the art world, where authenticity is one of the greatest pieces of value that you can have, it becomes a huge problem. How do you say that something is authentic if it can be copied and pasted as many times as you want? And this is the real innovation that has happened in the past couple of years, is there's been a new technology called blockchain. Some of you may have heard of it, used for all sorts of different financial markets mostly, but it has a lot of other applications as well. In this case, we have a technology called NFT, non-fungible token. Now, the fungible part just means unique. So gold, for example, doesn't matter if it's this gold or that gold, it can be exchanged. Whereas if something is non-fungible, then it means that it is unique in its place. In the same way that any kind of normal art is non-fungible, in the same way we must also create some kind of authenticity when it comes to digital art. So it happens through a process called tokenization, and the technical details don't really matter. All that matters is that at the end of the day, you have a certificate that can 100% be verified to say, this piece of digital art belongs to me, or belongs to him. And most importantly, it can be given to somebody else. The ability to resell something gives somebody not only ownership of it, but also agency. And agency has been something that artists have dealt with for a very, very long time. And one of the greatest things about this new technology is that it not only gives them the agency to control the price of their own art, but continues to give them value even when it's being sold on a secondary market. What do I mean by that? Normally, if let's say an investor finds an artist and buys their work for $500, and a couple of years later sells it for millions because his work has gotten up so much. Well, the artist may be penniless. He never sees a cent of this because the investor was prudent. But with blockchain, we actually have the ability to control secondary markets. It's built in. It's not an agreement. It's just built into the way that it works, that if somebody continues to resell it, the original artist gets a certain percentage of that. That is a game changer. It's empowering to the artist itself. And this is the way that technologies really should be used, is to give more agency to the players that are involved. So where is this technology at right now? If you look back a couple of years, it didn't really exist. And last year, in total, there were $25 million of sales in NFTs. That's really cool, but it's nothing in comparison to the $64 billion that we were talking about. I think that it's a little bit, maybe not the best comparison to make, because they don't really seem to be in the same kind of class. Instead, I think it's more interesting to just look at how this market itself is growing. 25 million in a year is pretty cool. But if you look at just January, just last month, they were already making 12 million in tokenized sales. That's half of the worth that was made all of last year. And you go back a couple of years and there was nothing. So you can see it's an expanding market. It's something that is growing as we move along. And that's a really, really exciting place to be. And it's not just replacing existing financial models, it's also innovating. So for the first time last year, an NFT, a tokenized piece of artwork, was sold on an existing art auction. So Christie's, if you've had anything to do with the art world, Christie's is an auction house that you've probably heard of that sells all of the big ticket names. And until now, these tokenized arts have existed on several small websites that were able to, generate some sort of buzz and generate quite a bit of sales. But the fact that the traditional art market, like Christie's, has been involved and getting actively involved with this new technology is exciting. It means that there's a certain level of acceptance, there's a certain level of agency. Once again, that word. Now, this was the piece that was actually exhibited, and this was the piece that was sold. It is apparently a portrait of Bitcoin's creator. And as you'll see, a lot of times these crypto art pieces have something to do with cryptocurrency themselves. And I think that's more of a trend that has to do with the fact that this is a burgeoning new technology. But it was sold for $130,000, which was multiple times higher than its estimate. What does that mean? Well, not too much, really. It just means that people are interested in it. But it's fascinating to see that the traditional art worlds are actually interacting now with digital art worlds. Now, if we take a look at another example, this is a rose called the Forever Rose. This rose was sold for $1 million and is currently the most expensive crypto asset that has ever been sold. Now, interestingly enough, even this part was a bit of an innovation, because it was collectively bought by 10 collectors at the same time. And it was actually a Valentine's gift. So I think it's very, think about it what you will, but I think it's kind of cute that something that is so highly valued and so innovative has something to do with love, maybe? Does Valentine's Day have to do with love? Maybe it's about the commercialization of love. I don't know. It's kind of fun, though. Nonetheless, the valuation of what this art is worth is one aspect to this puzzle. It's cool to see that things are becoming more and more expensive, but what's more interesting is to see how artists use the medium itself to critique the very idea of value creation. Now, this is one art piece that was, or it wasn't a single art piece, it was actually a collection that was for the very first time sold in something called a drop. Now, this was not newest to something completely new to this artist. These drops have been happening for a while. But in the same sense that a traditional art house might have an auction, a certain time where value is being created, they also have these drops where kind of a spotlight is given to an artist during a certain time slice. And in this case, he was given, I think, a couple hours, maybe half an hour, and had a multitude of different kinds of products that he was selling. It wasn't just, you buy this art piece for this amount. There were certain of those for sure. There were closed editions where there might be a limited amount that were sold, or a single edition where it's only one piece that is completely unique, or in this case, the open editions. An open edition was something that I think is, it's a slight innovation, but it's still interesting to see. that these 3 pieces were allowed to be bought by whoever wanted to for 5 minutes only. Only 5 minutes. And in this time, they were able to generate, I think, up to $500,000 worth of value. And over the course of this entire day, he generated over $3.5 million worth of cryptocurrency. Interestingly, as a side point, it's not dollars that this was sold for. It was specifically sold in a cryptocurrency form. It's just the nature of the way that the technology works. But it has an interesting quirk that it's not given into something that is stable. Cryptocurrency is currently inherently volatile, meaning depending on how the markets go, the value of that art can go up or it can go down. And you might think, well, that's a little bit absurd. And it's absolutely true, but it's no different than the way that our current markets actually work. The US dollar is relatively stable, but at the end of the day, it's just as volatile as everything. If you go back a couple hundreds of years, thousands of years even, financial markets have been incredibly volatile. And so it's interesting to see how when a new technology comes up and a new way to evaluate things comes up, that the art market tends to just value things in a different way. This is another piece by Beeple. It's called Cryptocurrency is Bullshit, which I think is a great title. It went for, I think, $80,000. And it just goes to show that not only are we creating value surrounding these things, but it's very ironic. Humor seems to be one of the ways to direct attention in this new financial world. Beeple is very, very self-aware and very, very ironic and humorous about how he approaches his artwork. And you'll find this again and again and again. I'd like to give you one more example from the absurd part of this world. What would you value this cube as? Well, in a traditional art format, you might debate about where it comes from, who made it. You know, sometimes there are certain ways to evaluate something that are based on the centimeters of how big a painting actually is. And then you bid, and whoever has the highest amount of money, that is then what that painting is worth, at least for the time being, until somebody, offers more, and then it'll be worth that. But what's very interesting here is that this artist, Pak, one of the most fascinating crypto artists in my opinion, decided to do something completely different. He decided to sell the same piece of art at different prices at the same time. He made one called the cheap one. He made one called the expensive one. The cheap one was for $500. The expensive one was for $10,000. The unsold was for $1 million. And he gave away a bunch of them as well, for free. But nonetheless, they were all referring to the exact same piece of art. It was important. These were not unique pieces that were sold or sent to people. They were all referring to the exact same digital file. So it really calls into question, who owns this piece of art? What is that art worth? Is it worth something different to this person than to this person? Absolutely. It brings a certain objectivity to the very, very subjective nature of art. And this brings me to the future. Where are we going to go from here? Nobody really knows. I'm definitely not somebody who can look into the future, but at the same time, we can take a look at a few of the trends. What I said in the beginning was that art is an asset, and being legally recognized as an asset is one way to generate wealth into the future. Where money can be made, money will be invested. And in the same way, guess what is not an asset class yet? Crypto assets. So I think that this is something that is going to change as we move forward, because we've seen laws change in different countries, based on how modern they are, how good their infrastructure is. But crypto assets, whether they're real estate investments or tokenized companies, have become legally recognized. And now I think one of the next steps that's going to happen is for digital art crypto assets to become legally recognized. Why does that matter? Is because when you are able to have money flow into a system, the system grows itself. Now, until recently, art has been mostly about exclusion. It's been about being exclusive and unique and restricting access. Say what you will, think what you will about this, but digital art has the exact opposite effect. when we're living in a digital world where something can be reproduced millions of times, then uniqueness is only provided by a contract. The opposite is true. You want to spread it as much as possible in order to generate PR, basically, surrounding your art piece. And so a lot of the traditional values are kind of put on their head. And as we watch more money come into this, I mean, if you listen to the speakers that we had yesterday, none of them are in it for the big money. I mean, you might have a couple of artists that are greedy, but I like to believe that art comes from a place of creation, that art comes from a spark of creativity. But nonetheless, I think all of us would like to see more money flow into this industry. Because when you find money flowing into an industry, all these secondary services start to pop up. You have PR agencies, you have communications, you have platforms, you have awards, you have all of these secondary services that are surrounding this, and it becomes more meaningful. It has a certain level of influence, and it has a standing in society that basically says that it has respect. And at the end of the day, this is one of the most important things that I think that art really should have, is respect. If you take a look at what cryptocurrency has become, a lot of people see it as speculation. A lot of people see it as a joke. I'm not sure if you've heard of Dogecoin, but it's basically just a copy of Bitcoin with a dog's face on it. Somehow, that has a multi-billion-dollar market cap. That is bizarre. Why? When we take a look at these digital art, pieces of crypto art, a lot of them are very humorful. But that does not mean that they don't deserve the same level of respect. Instead, it's doing what digital art does best, which is holding up a mirror to society, and to take a look at what we consider valuable, and to challenge us to think about what we think ourselves about art, about money, and about value. And as long as digital art continues to challenge our own ideas, it will continue to grow, and will continue to let money flow into this market. And I really, really, really hope to see our values change about how we think about money. And if we are able to slightly change that and hopefully influence us in a slightly other way, then it'll have done its job. Thank you.